Welcome back to another Murderous Minds Monday, where we cover the most sadistic and insane serial killers of the modern age. Today we are covering one that is very popular, that I think most people have heard of, but maybe don't know all the story. We are covering David Berkowitz, commonly known as the son of Sam. I'm going to be covering his early life, his childhood, and the murders that he committed, and his subsequent arrest. So if you want to hear the story of David Berkowitz, aka the son of Sam, then just keep on watching. David Berkowitz was actually born Richard David Falco in Brooklyn, New York on the 1st of June 1953. Born to his mother Betty, but we don't actually know who his father is, since his mother Betty was actually having an affair with a man called Joseph Kleinman at the time, who was a Long Island businessman. His mother Betty was a waitress, and her husband left her when he found out about her affair with Joseph Kleinman. Betty was pregnant with David at the time, and Joseph said that he didn't want a baby, and so when he was a newborn, he was put up for adoption. When David was just 2 weeks old, he was adopted by his parents Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, who then went on to rename him and just swap his middle and his first name round, so he was known as David Robert Berkowitz. So David grew up in a with mostly Jewish and Italian families around him in the Southview section of the Bronx in Brooklyn. It is stated that he had quite a normal childhood, and Nathan and Pearl raised him like he was their own child. He was the only child that the couple would ever have. But by the age of 5, when David was in kindergarten, he actually missed like 46 days of kindergarten for some reason, from like illnesses and things. When he was in kindergarten, he actually came home from school one day with sand in his hair that a girl had tipped onto him, and Pearl slapped David for coming home in such a state. Also, around this age, he started having showers with his adopted father Nathan. Nothing else is really mentioned about this, but again, this was just information I thought was interesting to know, that at this time he was taking naked showers with his adopted father. In 1959, at the age of 6, David began to notice that the power that men had over women when he saw a man go into the women's bathroom and heard the shrieks of the women. Also, he was actually really clever at school, and at the age of 9 he had an IQ of 118, which the average for a 7-year-old is between 90 to 110, so he has above average IQ. Later on in 1960, David was actually hit by a car and suffered a severe head injury. And a few months later, he actually ran into a wall and suffered further head injuries, which, if you notice, is a very common occurrence for serial killers to have head injuries. It was also this same year, so a lot happened in this year. This same year, his adoptive parents, Nathan and Pearl, actually told him that he was adopted. So until the age of 9, he didn't actually know that he was adopted. Between the ages of 10 and 14, David was described as being very big for his age, and he was teased at school and was also a little bit of a loner. And he always felt like a loner and less attractive than his peers at school. Actually began to assault many of the children in the neighborhood, and his neighbors actually described him as being very erratic as well. And as he was an only child, it meant that he didn't really know how to act around the other children. He didn't know how to play or just act when other children were around him. In 1963, at the age of 10, he actually saw a girl and her mother get hit by a car and die, and teachers began to comment on his math skills, which began to improve around this time, and he was slowly showing signs of patience. So things seemed to be looking up by the age of 10. He was also described as being a lot taller than his peers, so sort of developmentally a bit ahead of the rest of his peers in his class. And he would actually deliberately befriend younger, smaller children because he found them easier to bully and easier to manipulate. His teachers then began to describe him as a moody child who could do good work if he wanted to, but he got easily upset if things didn't go the way he wanted them to. Also around this time, he began to complain to his parents that monsters were bothering him, and it meant that he had to either sleep with the light on or sleep with his parents in the room, which annoyed them because obviously they knew that these voices and these monsters weren't real, but they couldn't explain that to David. He wasn't understanding, and these voices to him were very, very real. In 1965, at the age of 12, he entered into junior high school, and he began to set hundreds of fires, which he said made the voices stop bothering him, but this is what the voices were wanting him to do. They were wanting him to set these fires, apparently. However, he did claim that the voices stopped bothering him by the age of 13, but they would later return. As we have found with research of many serial killers, David began to torture animals, which is a very common occurrence. For some reason, I don't quite know what it is about torturing animals, but I know a lot of serial killers do it. He killed his mum's parakeet by giving it small doses of cleaning fluid over a period of 3 weeks. So it wasn't just sort of normal just killing them, it was slow, painful deaths. He then carried on by killing thousands of bugs, so not like big animals but still animals nonetheless, by burning them and gluing them with rubber cement. Then later that year in 1966, he witnessed another child die. He witnessed a boy die from falling off the side of a bus, which must have been so traumatizing. So by this time he's seen 3 people be killed. Like, I just couldn't imagine. Then as he was part of the Jewish society, he celebrated his bar mitzvah at Temple Adath, Israel, but there were no friends there. As I said, he struggled to make friends, and also his parents didn't really have many friends either, so it was just a few of his parents' friends that were in attendance. It was a very small bar mitzvah. Sadly, on the 10th of May 1967, at the age of 14, David's mother Pearl died from breast cancer, but his father, Nathan, had hid this illness from David, so her death came as a massive shock. Like, he wasn't expecting his mother to die, so there was no, like, preparation for this. Not that you can ever be prepared for someone to die, but just to know that the end is coming soon, I think would have been a little bit easier for him. And this really angered David, as I think it would anger anyone, to be honest. So his grades began to slip after the death of his mother, which is to be expected. I wouldn't really expect anything else. And he also took up rock climbing around this time as well. And as I said, he was part of the Jewish community. So his father sat Shiva, which is the Jewish 7 days of mourning after his mother Pearl died. And this meant that David was allowed to continue to go to school, but he could not watch TV during this week of mourning. He was once a B student, but now his grades were slipping to F's or low C's. His teachers said that he showed more strength in understanding in vocabulary, and his difficulties in school were thought to be more like emotional because of his mother's death. In 1968, at the age of 15, he went on a few dates, but he mostly just fantasized about being with these girls and just masturbated about the girls because he didn't have any luck with actually dating women, which he's only 15 at this time. I don't think that's an issue. He failed most of his classes by 10th grade, and he also very randomly formed a fire department with some of his friends from school, which is quite strange because he was setting fires still, like I said, because of the monsters. So this was a very strange thing to do. And also at the age of 16, he experienced oral sex for the first time, and he realised that he preferred oral sex and petting over regular intercourse. And then at the age of 17, he moved to Co-op City Housing Association in the Bronx. And this is where he continued his criminal activities and was involved in petty vandalism, breaking car windows, setting fires, and he continued to torture animals around this time as well. David's father, Nathan, actually went on to meet another woman called Mary, who he later married. Mary actually had a 25-year-old daughter, but David did not like this one bit. He didn't get on with the wife and he wasn't happy about the marriage at all. So his father moved to Florida with his new family and left David behind. Yeah, there isn't much known about David's father after this. He went on to graduate high school with a 3.3 GPA, and on the 23rd of July 1971 he went in to enlist into the army. And in July of the same year, at the age of 18, he actually went on to pass the psychological and physical test to fully enroll into the army. The test actually indicated that he would do well in the infantry training and was just enrolled as a normal recruit. After enlisting into the army, he was shipped to Korea as a specialist E4, where he was stationed for 10 months. During his time in the army, he actually started using weed, mescaline, amphetamines, and LSD, which I'm not too sure how you get hold of all of that, but there you go, there must be a way. And also his peers in the barracks called him Wolf because of the abundant amount of body hair he had on him. On the 3rd of September 1972, he was caught stealing food from the mess hall and was cited for 2 incidents where he refused to move when his unit was ordered to do so. So he refused to move from Korea. Also, while he was in the army, he also had a tendency to be tardy and to suddenly just go AWOL whenever he wanted. One night he actually missed the bus back to the barracks and he was fined $50 for missing the bus. At the end of 1972, he actually had sexual intercourse for the first time with a prostitute, and he actually contracted an STD from this encounter. And then in January of 1973, he was stationed at Fort Knox in Kentucky and started attending a Baptist church where he was praying because he felt empty. However, it is said in the army he was given the general rating of an outstanding army soldier. That's the word. He was also known to be very dependable, even though he didn't seem to follow orders, which is, it seems a bit counter, I don't know, doesn't really make sense, but there you go, that's what they said, so we'll go with it. On the 13th of May 1974, at the age of 20, he started setting fires again, and he was responsible for setting over 1,411 fires, which he actually kept a detailed journal of all of these fires that he set. He then changed religion from being Jewish to being Baptist and was baptized on the 18th of May 1974. He was then honourably discharged from the army. I'm not too sure why, but he was honourably discharged from the army on the 25th of June 1974 and then went on to be an IBI security guard. While actually on duty as a security guard, he was actually bitten by a dog, but he later on worked well with dogs and was one of the only security guards who was not scared of dogs, even after being bitten, which is very strange. At the age of 21 in 1974, he enrolled in the Bronx Community College and started a job as a cab driver. Around this time, he also found out that his name was actually Richard Falco, that was his birth name, and not David Richard Berkowitz. He continued to set fires around New York City, and then in January 1975, he moved into an apartment on 2161 Barnes Avenue, and he continued his mistreatment of animals, and on the 2nd of March 1975 he actually shot a German Shepherd. In May of the same year, he found his birth mother. He found it really easy to find her, located her, and sent her Mother's Day cards. He then began to grow a relationship with his mother. He continued to set fires all around New York and was actually hired as a security guard at JFK Airport. And he began to claim that the voices of the dog which accompanied him on the shift were telling him to do things. So at the end of 1975, he quit his job as a security guard and began to work as a duct worker at an air conditioning company. So he's not really holding down a job at this point. He's kind of flitting from one thing to another and not able to stay in one place. In November of 1975, he wrote a letter to his adoptive father, Nathan, admitting that he had feelings of deep depression, and he started listening to the voices in his head. And he actually attempted to murder 2 women in December of 1975. This was actually on Christmas Eve of 1975. The first woman was not identified, but wasn't seriously hurt, and she was able to get away from David and was able to fight back. However, the second victim we know is Michelle Foreman, and David attacked her as she crossed a bridge, but luckily she survived with minimal wounds. In January of 1976, David suddenly stopped visiting his birth mother and sister and actually just moved into a 2-family home in New Rochelle. This was owned by Jack and Nana Cassera. He actually went on to receive his rifle permit since the stabbings hadn't gone the way he wanted. He then decided to buy a .44 caliber Commando Mark III semi-automatic rifle and 4 boxes of ammunition, which he would use later on in his future attacks. Like I said, he couldn't hold down the job, so in March of 1976, he began to work as a postal worker and moved out of the Cassera's house to escape the demons in his head. And he thought that the Casseras were the demons and that they were going to get him to do bad things. He moved into apartment 22 on Pine Street, and he lived next door to a 63-year-old man called Sam Carr. Sam Carr actually had a dog, which was a Labrador called Harvey, who David would actually attempt to murder. He gave the dog a cocktail called a Molotov. I don't quite know what cocktail this is. I did try to look it up, but I don't know what it consists of. But it didn't work, and he eventually did try to shoot the dog. But again, this didn't work either. So Sam Carr's dog would actually later develop into one of David's demons in his head. And this is why he referred to himself as Son of Sam, because he was referring to the dog that Sam owned called Harvey, and that's where the name Son of Sam came from. In June of 1974, David bought a .44 caliber Carter Arms Bulldog handgun while visiting an old army buddy in Houston. So this is where his murderous rampage would begin. On the 29th of July 1976, David would claim his first victim. In Pelham Bay, an area of the Bronx, 2 women, Jody Valenti and Donna Lauria, were both 18 and were sitting in Jody's car when a man approached and fired 3 bullets. Donna was killed instantly, and Jody was shot in the thigh before the man just walked away quickly. So Jody managed to survive her wounds, but unfortunately Donna was killed instantly by the shots fired by David. She was able to describe the man as around 30-ish. He was about 5'8" and about 200 pounds with short, dark, curly hair. But this wasn't able to bring any suspects to police as they weren't able to identify the man. He later claimed that he didn't actually want to kill the two girls, but the demons forced him to shoot them. However, once it was done, he was exhausted but had a sort of pleasure from doing the job. And he said that Sam was pleased and promised that Donna would be his bride and that she would eventually come back from the dead and they would be together. David then attacked his next victim on the 23rd of October 1976. These were Carl Denaro, who was 20, and Rosemary Keenan, who was just 18. They were shot while sitting in a parked car in a residential area of Flushing's, Queens. Both victims survived, but Denaro was actually struck in the head by one of the bullets, and he actually had to have a metal plate put into his head, and he was never the same again, which I'm not surprised. Police actually think that Denaro was mistaken for a woman as he had long sort of shoulder length hair, and they think that the shooter thought he was a woman sitting in the car, and that's why he was attacked. On the 27th of November 1976, following a late movie, Donna DeMasi, 16, and Joanna Lomino, aged 18, were heading to Lomino's home in Floral Park when they were approached on the street by a man dressed in military outfit. He produced a revolver and shot each woman once. David fired several more times into the residence of the Lominos before running away. Though shot in the neck, Donna actually survived this attack without permanent injury. However, Joanne had actually been shot in the back and was a paraplegic for the rest of her life. However, both did survive this attack. So David's liking this because he's getting away with all of these murders and all of these attacks, and the police are no closer to finding out who he is. On the 30th of January 1977, Christine Frood, 26, and her fiance John Deal, 30, were shot when they were sat in John Deal's car in Flushing, Queens. Deal suffered minor injuries, but Christine was shot twice and later died in hospital. Like the previous attacks, there appeared to be no motive, but following this murder, the police made their first public announcement about the attacker, as they were able to link it to the incidents that had happened previously. He was nicknamed the .44 caliber murderer, since that's the ammo that was used in all of the murders. And the assailant seemed to be attacking young women with long dark hair, and the police said they were actually looking for multiple suspects at the time. When returning home from college on the 8th of March 1977, Virginia Vosarikian, 19, was shot in the head and died instantly. She lived in the same village that Christine had actually been attacked in previously, and the Daily News and the New York Post were reporting on shootings nearly daily because of the amount of attacks that were happening in the area. And just 2 days after the attack of Virginia, police revealed that they believed that it was all linked to the previous attacks that had happened. In the early hours of the morning of the 17th of April 1977, Valentine, 18, and her boyfriend Alexander, who was 20, were sitting in Valentine's car. So all of these are happening in cars, it seems like, in the Bronx, where they were each shot twice. Alexander died at the scene, and Valentine later died in hospital. David had actually written a handwritten letter to the police and left it at the scene of the crime, and this letter stated that he wanted to refer to him as the son of Sam, and he promised that the killings would continue. On the 19th of April 1977, Sam Carr received a letter from David, so this is David's neighbour, which he marked as anonymous and stated, "I can see that there will be no peace in my life or my family's life until I end yours." This shook Carr, and he sent this letter to the police. A Daily News columnist called Jimmy Breslin received another handwritten letter from David, who claimed to be the shooter, on the 30th of May 1977. Within the letter, the writer name-checked one of the first victims, Loria, warning Breslin to not forget her and not let any other people forget her. He said that she was a very sweet girl, but Sam's a thirsty lad and he won't let me stop killing until he's got his fill. The letter was signed off as son of Sam, and the Daily News sent the letter to the police, and just 10 days later they published a redacted version of the letter, and it would become one of the paper's biggest selling issues with more than 1 million copies sold. With the reports now circulating that the victims all had long or medium-ish dark brown hair, a lot of women were changing their hair and either getting it cut or changing the colour of it. On the 6th of June 1977, David wrote another letter to his downstairs neighbour called Craig Glassman, which threatened him and read, "True, I am the killer, but Craig, the killings are at your command." Basically saying that he was only killing because Craig was making him kill, which that would terrify me. On the 26th of June 1977, the next attack occurred. After leaving a disco in Bayside, Queens, Judy Placido, 17, and Sal Lupo, 20, were sitting in Sal's car, and luckily both victims survived their injuries. They were both shot, but Sal told police that he and Judy had been discussing the Son of Sam killer only minutes before the attack occurred. David actually quit his job as a postman after the death or the murder of Donna. I actually forgot to mention that further up, but he did quit his job as a postman, so he wasn't actually working at this time. Robert Villante, 20, and Stacy Moskowitz, 19, were shot in Robert's car on their first date on the 31st of June 1977. Robert would actually lose his left eye, and Stacy would die just 18 hours after the attack, which was actually the first to take place in Brooklyn and the first to involve a victim with blonde hair, as Stacy actually had blonde hair. So now this scared people even more because everyone thought it was going to be dark brown haired people, but now his victim type has changed. Days later, an eyewitness would come forward claiming to see a man with a gun just minutes before the murders took place. And there was actually another officer at the scene who was actually writing parking tickets, and the person saw that the person who shot the victims had a parking ticket on their car. A search was conducted and revealed that the car that was ticketed belonged to David Berkowitz, who was already being investigated over the complaints of harassments to his neighbours. Obviously, he'd sent those letters to them. On the 6th of December, David actually set fire to bullets on Craig Glassman's front door. And then on the 10th of August 1977, David Berkowitz was arrested at the age of 22 in front of his apartment. Police had been investigating Berkowitz's car and discovered a rifle in the back seat, maps of the crime scenes, and ammunition. Because they thought that Berkowitz would put up a fight, they waited for him to leave his apartment. And when he left, he was arrested and he sat behind the wheel of his car, and they saw that there was a bag next to him containing the .44 caliber rifle. It's reported that Berkowitz smiled and simply said, "Well, you got me." That's all he had to say to the police that had just arrested him. David underwent psychiatric testing at the Kings County Psychiatric Hospital, and they concluded that Berkowitz had mental problems, but that he was clinically sane to stand trial. On the 8th of May 1978, Berkowitz would confess to the shootings, claiming that Sam was a demonic spirit who spoke to him via his former neighbour's black Labrador, Harvey. David also confessed to the 1,500 fires set around the city, and it turned out he was only 23 at this, like, when he committed his first murder, which is so young. On the 12th of June 1978, Berkowitz was sentenced to 25 years for each of the murders, and these were to run concurrently. He was then taken to Austin Correctional Facility on the 13th of June, and then to Clinton Correctional Facility near Danmora, New York, where he underwent a further series of psychiatric tests. Though there was no hard evidence uncovered to support the claim that there may be more, people wonder whether Berkowitz was actually acting alone and whether there were more people out there that committed these murders. According to Jim Rothstein, a retired New York Police Department detective who was working in the squad that brought down David, he stated that Berkowitz didn't do all the killings. However, RBI agent Robert Ressler admits that he believes David did not hear voices from his neighbour's dog at all, but that he fabricated this because he wanted to be found insane. He claimed to have this skill because of his resentment towards his mother and an inability to establish good relationships. In July of 1979, David was actually attacked in prison, and he actually required 58 stitches to fix the injury, and he was left with a 8-inch scar as a result of this attack. In 1987, at the age of 34, David said that he accepted Christ as his personal saviour and rededicated his life to him. In July of 2002, David attended his first parole hearing, which was denied, and then he attended another one in 2004 at the age of 51, which was also denied. There was actually a recent parole hearing for David on the 14th of May this year, 2024. He's 70 years old, still in prison, and this parole hearing was rejected as well. So he is still behind bars where he should be, doing the time for the crimes that he committed. So that is the end of today's case about the son of Sam, David Berkowitz. Let me know down below whether you think he actually committed all these murders on his own. Do you think it's a possibility he was helped with these crimes? Whether there are other people responsible for this? I believe he did this all himself, and he was just following either the voices in his head, or he's just a sadistic killer who just wanted to murder people. Either way, a horrible man, and he is where he should be, behind bars at the moment. And hopefully he will stay there until his last breath. That sounds really mean, but I think it's where he should be. If he's reclaimed Christ and everything, amazing, but I don't think that makes up for the murders that he committed. So let me know down below what you thought of today's case. Let me know any other cases you want to hear me cover. I will be doing one every week for the next however many Mondays there are in the future. So yeah, let me know what you want to hear. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss the next Murderous Minds Monday. But I will see you next week for another Murderous Minds Monday where we cover another serial killer. Bye!